Hello， 欢迎再度回到安然空间。今天呢是史上第一次，我邀请我的伴侣跟我一起在这个线上节目开录。那为什么我会决定要邀请他呢？因为我就发现，我们平常真的有非常非常多的话题，然后都很多时候我都觉得我已经被他启发了，或者是我们讨论的内容实在是很适合跟大家分享一些关于自我成长，然后灵性提升的一些概念。然后我就觉得不邀请他实在是太可惜了，因为这就是最自然的我。然后我们平常的讨论就真的是很干货满满。那因为他不说中文这样子，所以我尽可能的会在我们谈话的过程中会穿插就是中文翻译这样子，对我们彼此可能都会比较好顺利进行。那因为这是第一次尝試这种方式，所以也很期待你们的反应。那我们就开始吧。Hi, Brian.
Hi. Hi, Shanti.
Yeah, it's really my pleasure to have you in my podcast because we've been talking a lot about inspirations and some thoughts about life for so long. And this is our first time to really talk in my podcast. So there are actually some moments when we're talking some subjects, I was thinking, shit, I should have you like in my podcast, you know?
Yeah, it's like, oh, if only we could just record that. It's like, oh my God, that was an episode already. And it happens like every day. Every time we do this, we're like, we just talk and naturally get into a really deep conversation. And that's what I love being with you. It's the type of conversations we have. I just wish we could have some automatic recording so you can just put it on your podcast.
Yeah. Now it's kind of on purpose that make both of us feel kind of nervous. Like, wait, what
This is the first time.
Yeah, this is the first time, so let's see. And so, okay, what subjects are we gonna talk today?
You take me. You're my master. You're the leader.
I remember one time we talked about where am I and who am I. I think there's lasting thousands of years questions that philosophers ask themselves. And for those people who really want to know what's the meaning of their life and where they're gonna go or who they're gonna be, it's very important to them. And the reason why I want to talk about this topic, like one time I got a yin yoga teacher training, and the teacher asked us on purpose that, hey, so in the next few days your homework is to think about this question: who you are and where are you? And it sounds like kind of stupid, like, what are you talking, like, who am I? I'm Shanti and I live in Taiwan and I'm studying in the US. I can answer you back like this.
Yeah, kind of these external like ways to describe what you're doing. And it seems like a lot of it is kind of in this external sense of like how can you describe what your job is or what you're doing with your time, who you're with, where you are. But are these really who you are? Is that the essence of you? Is that something that you could say that's a definition of you that won't change no matter where you are? So yeah, I could see how this question is like kind of confusing, and there's many ways to answer it. Yeah, it's a big one.
那么今天呢，想要讨论的主题就是关于我是谁，我在哪里。那为什么我想要讨论这个？记得之前有一次，我就跟我伴侣一起在聊这个话题，是因为那时候我在接受那个英语家事资讯，然后老师他就给我们功课说啊，这礼拜我要请你们静下心，好好的去思考2个问题：你是谁？你从哪里来？然后我们一开始一般人可能会想说，在说什么啊？就是我是谁？不就是我的名字？就是比如说Shanti 啊。那我从哪里来？我从台北来啊。那这些我都可以跟你马上说我的一些角色，我的名字，我的 title，我的地理位置这些。但是这个真的能够代表我是谁吗？这又真的能够代表我从哪里来吗？这个是 可能是千年来各个哲学家他们力求的一个问题，所有对于自我成长或者是关注自己灵性层面成长的人都会问自己的：我到底是谁？那我又要到哪里去？生命的意义是什么？所以这个是一辈子都没有办法停止的探寻，可以这么说。所以，对啊，我们今天就要来聊聊这件事情。Yeah, I remember one time we talked about this, and you're talking that
there's no you. There's no one definition of you. That's what I said. I said that it has to do with ego, because when we ask ourselves, "Who am I?" we ask it in a way that's almost saying, "Who do I think I am?" And oftentimes, actually, people think that who they think they are is based on how others think of them. So it's almost like, I think I am the person that you think I am. And that is a delusion that is very common today. We tend to confuse who we are with what we think everyone's perception of us is. If others think that we are attractive or we are ugly, we tend to believe that we are that. If others think that we are wealthy or we are smart, those are things that come into what we call the identity of us. So what I'm saying is that the identity is oftentimes dependent on the opinion of others. And maybe it's even dependent on what we think are the opinions of others are before we even know that. So that's really interesting because we could be deluded. We could actually misunderstand what other people think of us. We could hold an assumption for what the world thinks who we are, what the world perceives us as. And that will influence the story we tell on who we are. What I'm saying is that when people answer who we are, and when people live their life, they're oftentimes holding a delusion based on what they think other people think of them, what they think society thinks of them.
I remember before you told me like it's actually not you, it's itself. It's you, your identity is composed of where you got education, what education you received, what culture values you received too. And you hold the concepts for yourself. It's actually the combination of all these values around you.
Yeah, I guess one way to say it is that who you are is the combination of influences and decisions you've made and experiences you've had over the course of your life that will continue to evolve and change over time. And who you are is the entire continuum between the time you're born to when you die, and the flow of experiences you've had through that time throughout your life. That's one way to answer it. When we are born, we have some aspect to who we are based on our genetics. There's genetic code that predispositions us to certain physical attributes, mental attributes. And when we grow up in our first years of life, we're completely at the whim of the influence of our parents and how they parent us, what experiences they bring us, what information we absorb when we are a child. When we're a little bit older, we become a combination of agreements that we adopt. Let's say, oh, don't hit other children because that's bad. Or let's say, don't eat the cookies first before dinner. These are agreements, the rules that we see the world in and also become who we are. We see outside how people operate. They see that they exchange these like pieces of paper for goods at the store. They see that there are cars going by, driving in some parts, people walking on other parts of the street. This is the construction of the world, the society that we live in. And all these understandings come to how we perceive the world and how we begin to live. And that also becomes a part of us. So yeah, many aspects in just the first few years of our life that kind of contribute to who we are.
Yeah, so the key concept from what you're sharing is about our ego and also the delusion. 所以呢，刚刚我们在讨论说我是谁，跟我从哪里来，有时候我们会很自然而然的就觉得说我的名字是什么，然后我的地理位置我是从台北或者是哪里，我们都很容易这么自我介绍。但是其实这些外向的一些名称啊，地理位置上面的名称，其实它不能够真正代表我们身为一个人的本质。很多时候这些 title 就是社会给予我们的角色嘛，也跟于建构我们的自我很有关系。但是在建构自我的过程中，我们就容易形成一个对世界的混淆的，不是那么客观的看待发生在自己周边的事情。比如说呢，我们常常认定我们自己是谁，是因为我们从小到大接收别人告诉我们自己是谁。我认定的我是别人想象中的我，也因此我把别人对我的评价看作是我自己的身份认同。比如说 Brian 他有提到说，如果有人可能在你从小的时候就是说你说你真的很丑或者是你真的完全没有吸引力的人，或者是你是一个很漂亮的人，那你是不是就把这些话种在你的心里，你就会把他人的想法变成是自己对自己的看法，但是你去接收这样子的讯息，对你自己是个混淆的状态，因为它会导致我们误解这个世界，还有我们怎么看待周遭的事情。所以他刚刚主要是提到说，其实你要说问说我是谁，其实到后来好像没有一个具体的主体，并不是说我叫 Shanti， 我就能够说明我是谁，而是 Shanti 本身是从小到大呢所受的教育，然后家庭的培养，还有整个台湾的社会体制教导他的事情，它是所有这些价值观的集合体。也因此这样子的方式会形塑我们怎么看待这个世界。有可能我看待世界的方式跟我伴侣，因为他从小是在美国长大的嘛，所以他看待世界的方式跟我真的完全不一样。我们经常在彼此相处的时候，面对同一件事情，经常是会发生这种冲突。那这个冲突并不是来自于我们谁对谁错，而是我们真的是在不同的文化背景下被带大的。那也因此我们所代表背后的价值观是非常不同的，所以我们有好几次都必须好好坐下来谈我们为什么这么想。那我们会吵架的背后是因为什么原因？那我会这么想是因为我觉得在我的文化里面就是很习以为常的会这样子但是在他的文化里面他并不觉得。I just share that sometimes when we have fights, like a lot of time it's just not prove you right or I am right. It's nothing to do with right and wrong. It's actually more to do with the culture differences, like how I was being brought up and how you were brought up. Like we stand for two very different social system thinking, and that somehow it takes our time to really sit down and talk over why we have these fights, and then to see clearly why we think like this, what I stand for, what do you stand for, and to see if there's a midpoint we can both accept. You know, it's like running a relationship. It's like to see how we think can resonate with each other in a better way.
Yeah, and also I think it's a way for us to become aware of and reflect on the hidden mechanism behind why we do what we do. why we react the way we react. What is behind that? And perhaps it's maybe we got in a fight because I reacted in a way that I would have reacted because of that's how my parents taught me. Maybe my dad taught me, oh, the way I should react to a question is to have a very short yes or no. And maybe the way in your culture, and you're raised in your culture, maybe when you hear just yes or no, that could sound rude to you. And we're all coming with our different patterns of behavior that comes from how we were raised and what agreements we accepted from the outside world. Sometimes those things are going to come into conflict, and the relationship allows us to basically come into very intimate conflict with a person you really care about, and someone that hopefully you'll give space to reflect on why that conflict exists, why this behavior exists, and should we continue this behavior? Should we, based on what we value, do we stand for what we value when we have this behavior? Sometimes we're not aware of why we have this behavior, and sometimes the behavior it doesn't stand for actually what we really value. Is my behavior of, let's say, being a critical person and calling out someone for their mistakes, does that stand for my value of wanting to be someone with unconditional love? It doesn't. And our relationship has helped me reflect on the fact that I'm not aligned with my deepest values. I know I want to be someone with unconditional love. I know I want to be patient and warm and forgiving. But in many cases, I'm not. And in this relationship, this is where I could see the reflection of myself accurately and have a partner to help me, help motivate me get to the person I want to be.
I can take one example that tells how we react differently from our culture differences. Like in our culture, it's really common to have a thinking like, I don't want to make trouble to the others, don't make troubles. So whenever we have some bad moods or have some thoughts, just like that situation, and we tend not to tell or share how we feel and to really discuss what it means to me and why I feel like this. It's just most time we just become very quiet and not communicate because we think if I discuss this with you, it means we're gonna have a fight. And it's just not, I don't want to make you feel that I'm a trouble person, I'm a troublesome. So a lot of time, when a few times we had a fight before, and I tend to have like, I'm angry, I was angry, but I don't want to share with you at that time moment because I feel I don't want to make the whole thing goes really terrible for both of us. But instead, your way of approaching the conflicts is really, really different from the most men I met before or my previous partners. Like they either like escape or don't talk, but you're like, hey, what's going on? You catched me. You caught me being sad or being not happy, and you will talk to me, approach me firstly like, hey, how do you feel? Hey, what are you doing? Like, are you feeling good? Is there anything wrong? And it's kind of not easy thing for me to like be willing to talk this with partner, because I kind of feel like, no, if I talk about this, it means another fight is gonna be brought up, and I don't want to have a fight, and I don't want to make troubles. But actually, this is really helping the whole situation to just let's get the things clear right now, and to talk about it. Doesn't need necessarily to link to the conflicts, the fights. It's just I talk how I feel and why I feel like that, and let's see how my agreements look like. And in order to change the way I feel about the similar things, I have to reflect on the agreements I hold for the past few decades, so that I probably next time when I come another situation again, I won't be caught in the same mood again. And I think this is the very, very different. Probably from your culture, it's kind of rare for people to think I don't want to make trouble to the others. I want to hide my feeling. Is that common?
Well, actually, I'm Vietnamese Chinese American, and throughout my whole life, I was raised in a similar culture as you. When I was growing up, it's often not really okay for me to speak up my opinion. That would it would almost symbolize disrespect. Of course, that was just my time at home, and when I'm at school, I was encouraged to speak my opinion. But really, the idea of responsibly conveying my opinion and encouraging the other person, like you in this case, to share their opinion, knowing that we have a common goal, that's something that I learned relatively recently. It's something that in my history, I'm typically kind of a debater type of person. I like to debate and argue and win the argument. I'm competitive. I like to win, and I like to use my skill in logic and debating, piling evidence to make the person, to prove that they're wrong.
It's like American spirit?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a personality trait. I think it's certainly more common in America to kind of use your words to showcase your perspective. That's certainly true. But I think it's in general like a kind of a personality thing, and it's actually a little bit rare. But I guess what I'd have to say is that I didn't really grow up with this type of culture and the value of really communicating clearly, even among a conflict. How can we set aside our emotions to say, hey, what I know is that I love you and that you love me, and I want you to be happy and you want me to be happy.
So it's not really about the cultural differences in this case. It's more, would you say that American, like not Asian American, but American people, they are tend to willing to accept the emotions and willing to talk and discuss about this? Will you agree with that?
Yeah, I certainly do. I think it's like it's an American thing. I'm just saying that in my upbringing,
your personal experiences is
I've
not
had a
like
lot of
this.
trouble. I've had a lot of conflict with my personal upbringing, with my parents, about the ability to express clearly without feelings getting hurt. The ability to say that, like, hey, there's actually probably a misunderstanding here. And if only we could communicate clearly as to what I'm thinking, why I'm thinking what I'm thinking, what are you thinking, why are you thinking what you're thinking, we would probably not have a fight, right? Many of our fights, actually, Shanti, come from this, some assumption that I don't care about you or you don't care about me. Like, the general foundation of the fight is that, like, oh, you don't care about me or you're not enough for me. That is the overlying assumption. But these things are triggered based on these small differences in behavior we have. Maybe I forgot to do something that I promised you to do. And maybe you'll say, like, oh, that is, there goes Brian again. That's proof that he doesn't care about me. But when we talk about it, we could uncover that, like, oh, I'm so sorry about that. I have memory problems. I suck at remembering things for myself. I lose stuff all the time. And I don't want to lose stuff. And I've always had trouble with it. But this is something that happens to me. And how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? Okay, let's have a reminder system for Brian. Let's make sure that things are on the calendar. These things are sometimes helping us compensate for the shortcomings, the weaknesses that we have. But what's important here is that we clarify that it's not that I don't care about you, right? The fact that I forgot to do something for you is not because I don't care about you. And that is the most important piece of communication to get across. And up until that time, up until we communicate that, you're going to hold the belief that because I forgot, I don't care about you. And this is how we can hold these negative beliefs that aren't even true. And we can have them store inside of us, retaining negative energy, impacting our happiness day in and day out. I mean, I'd like to ask the audience of like, how many times did you hold a grudge for someone you care about, only to know that actually the reason why you were mad at them, it wasn't even true. The reason why maybe they were mad at you after they told you, you're like, hey, you actually misunderstand. I never thought that way. There's no reason to be mad. So 90% of our conflicts are embedded in misunderstanding. And that goes for not just this relationship, for every relationship.
对啊，那我们刚刚其实我们讲了很多，我现在试着接回去，因为是及时的去翻译我们刚刚说的话哦。那其实我刚刚有提到说，我觉得比如说像在我从小的生长背景下，我们的文化比较呈现一种不想去麻烦别人，或者是我有什么情绪的时候不太想要直接表达，立刻表达，都会觉得如果我有一些跟你意见不合的地方，或者是我心里觉得不舒服的地方，我只要现场表达出来，那对方可能就会觉得我是不是又要吵架了？因为好像我过去可能跟一些台湾的男朋友，就是在经营亲密关系的时候，会有这种情况发生。那久而久之，这种次数多，我就会知道说，我不想要当场就说出我的感觉，因为我们华人社会去讨论，你今天感觉怎么样啊？就像是外国人，他们即使我们去咖啡店买杯咖啡，买个茶，其实店员都会问我们，就是很随口问一句，How are you feeling? How do you do today? 就是很自然而然的，你就是会进行一个小小的谈话。那我们就是可以小聊一下我刚刚去了哪里，然后其实我心情还不错，是因为我刚刚又买了什么东西。这种其实是在他们的文化里面非常稀松平常，你可以去讨论，就是说自己的感受是什么，刚刚发生一点小事是什么。对他来讲，他自己其实说，在他的成长背景里面，因为他是华裔美国人嘛。他来自一个蛮传统的那种华人的文化背景，所以其实你要说他能够在他的家庭里面真正的去表达他自己的情绪，跟及时的说出口，其实也是蛮难的。在他的家庭里面比较少，但是当他跨出去，可能在他成长的过程中，跟整个外界的西方文化做融合的时候。他慢慢习得了这些事情，也慢慢的影响了他，也比较敢去勇于表达自己，跟及时辨认出自己的情绪。那他说，其实他原本也不是这样子，因为他从小环境就不是这样，是他后来刻意去练习，去做出这样子的改变。那这样子的改变到底能够为我们带来什么好处啊？我觉得这个是我们刚刚也有提到说，这是关于我们。为自己设下什么样的制约？举例来说，如果我发现他没有帮我做什么事情，我下意识就会觉得，他一定是没有那么在乎我，或者是他一定没有那么爱我。那我当下只要想到这个想法，我可能脸就会有点垮掉，然后心情就有点不太好。可能他也会感受到，为什么现在的Shanti好像心情不太好？那他的习惯，他后来已经养成说，他只要发现可能他的伴侣，一有一些心情上面的不同，他就会主动的问说，发生了什么事？你为什么，好像看起来心情不太开心？你可以跟我分享一下吗？那一开始我是 蛮抗拒的，因为我会下意识觉得说是不是我们要吵架，但是我不希望我们吵架啊。但是他其实他很努力的在去说明，他其实是想要解决我们相处上面的能够更为顺利这样子，所以他其实是很有耐心，一步一步引导我这样子。那我也慢慢的卸下心防，可以跟他分享一些我内在的感受。那就举刚刚的那个例子来说好了，我觉得他不帮我做这件事情，那是不是代表他没有那么在乎我？那之前都说好了，为什么这一次没有做出来什么的，我心情就会不好。那他就会跟我讲说，哦，其实他完全想的是不一样的，因为他忘记做这件事情，并不是因为忘记跟我的承诺，而是他真的是天生就是一个很容易健忘的人。他也很常就是答应朋友要做这件事情，结果又没有去做，然后朋友也是会念他说你为什么老是忘东忘西，就是他知道他承认有这个缺点，但是他不做真的不是因为他不在乎我或者是不爱我，只是因为他有天生这个习性，就是比较没有那么严谨的计划跟记得每一件事情这样。那我们就可以去瞧一个中间点，好，那为了要让你记得你该做什么事情，我是不是可以在那个 calendar 上面设定好什么时候的时候你应该要去完成什么事情。那其实这也是我们一直在做的事，就是我们也是有设立一个共同的那个Google 日历，然后分享彼此的行程，然后如果我需要他要做什么事情的话，我会在他那边写下一些东西去提醒他。那其实这个就是找到一个解决的方法，让我不会再误以为这个人是不爱我。因为你只要讲出来，你愿意讲说我的看法，他愿意分享他这个人的看法跟想法，我们就能够找出解决方法去破除那个制约，就是会觉得说这个人就是不爱我。那当我看到这个人的行为反应模式是这样子的时候，我会立刻连接到可能我过去被一些不好对待的经验，就会觉得对，男人就是这样子，男人就是不想付出或什么，可能是我过去对一些事情的解读，导致会有我对于自己会有这一个条约，会觉得说是这样子。所以当他没有做出我期待符合的样子的时候，我会马上连接到我过去的经验，就是告诉我自己说，对啊，你看男生就是这样子。但其实这对于经营一个好的关系没有任何的帮助，所以我觉得练习从表达自己跟发觉，其实第一步应该是要觉知到自己正在不开心，第二步是去解为什么会不开心，为什么会这样想。然后如果对方这个人是你可以邀请他，你可以作为一个 leader 去带领他说，我们可以找个可能当下你们彼此都没有办法好好谈，那是不是我们约定在几天后的某个时间，或者是当你之后找一个彼此心情都比较不会那么紧绷的时候，一起来讨论。那个时候你们才有办法去真正了解彼此，然后看出你们各自的不同，再去找到你们可以彼此调整的地方，才能是关系经营的一大步这样子。So we share a lot about how we perceive things. It's basically from the previous how we make some agreements to some specific things. So that will be together with us in our whole life journey if we don't really be aware of what that means to me. And I just took an example we just took. I think if you don't do something for me, it means you don't love me. But you say that, no, actually, I'm a person who kind of lose. I cannot really remember everything. But if we can really understand each other's differences and we talk about how we feel and how differences we are, so that in the future we can find a solution to solve this problem. Okay, if I wanted to let you to do these things to me, I just don't do it verbally. I also put the reminder in your Google Calendar so that could remind you to do things for me. And I want no longer to feel that, my partner just doesn't love me and he just doesn't care about me, It will break my agreements toward my partner that's been cultivated in the past few decades, and I think it's pretty healthy to run a relationship like this.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's also healthy for anybody to ask themselves, what are the agreements that they have when they're living their life every day? When they go to work today and they feel, maybe they feel pressure, maybe they're feeling judged, maybe they feel angry about something, maybe their coworker is sending them a piece of work late. All these points of emotion, we can always reflect on, what agreements do I have that are allowing me to feel these emotions? Many times these agreements will be some way that we are measuring. We are calculating between what's good and what's bad. We're categorizing what action is a good action, what action is a bad action. Oftentimes I am trying to reflect on myself. What am I measuring today? How did I perceive the world in terms of good and bad? With already almost like a lens in which to judge the world, what's good and bad. And from what I've learned, doing this closes my mind and my heart to a world of possibility, where there are many different types of perspectives, where my perspective on what's good and bad isn't the only one. And maybe there's ones out there that I actually can cooperate and agree with. So yeah, I think it's a good practice for anyone to reflect on the agreements, on the agreements that run their life.
Okay, so let's go back to our topic. Where am I, or where am I? Do you think there's an answer to it? What that really tells us? First thing that we talk is about ego, our identity, how people define us, and how we define us. That includes the other people's opinion toward us. It sounds like in order to know who am I and where am I, it has to do lots of the ego building process. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that the ego building process is a process of attachment. It's a process of defining who we are in a way that doesn't give us space to evolve and change. I think an ego is saying something like, oh, I'm Brian and I'm a successful person. I'm Brian and I'm never late to my appointments. I'm Brian and I'm really logical and use rationality and logic to make my decisions. And if I could look closer to my life, I would find examples of me not being like that all the time. Me not being successful. Me not being logical. They happen all the time. But it's just that because of the story we tell ourselves, we tend to screen out all these things, and we have a delusion for actually who we are. We simplify who we are.
Yeah. 所以我们刚刚谈到说，回扣到这个主题说，谈论我到底是谁，我从哪里来这件事情，是不是跟建构自我一个自然的过程？但是他也提到说，当我们建构这个世界，认定什么事情是被教育成是对的，什么是错的，其实它另一方面也是限缩我们发展的一个限制性。比如说他提到自己，他觉得好，如果我假定我告诉自己我就是一个不会迟到的人，那我是一个非常成功的人，那他就是带着这样子的想法告诉他自己我就是这样子的人。可是平心而论，如果是客观的去看他过去所有生命成长的历程，他总是可以找到一些时刻是他迟到了，或者是他不成功的一些事件。 那但是他一直不断告诉自己的那些故事，也形塑了他认定他在这个社会上如何看待自己，跟如何看待别人，如何看待他。那如果是这样子的话，我们就很难去接受我们自己啊。我其实过去也有迟到的时候，我有时候也是个失败的人。如果我们不承认那样曾经的过往，我们就很难在未来下决定或行动的时候，多加一点留意，或者是有一个谦逊的心，觉得说我还可以从别人那边学到一些什么，因为我也有失败的时候啊。如果一直把那个自我的墙筑得很高，我们就很容易屏蔽自己，去客观的面对自己。So would you say that, in order to know where we are, it's better to learn and remove our ego? You think like removing ego is a good thing?
I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say so. I think the chances that your ego or the identity that you can describe yourself in is accurate is quite low. Maybe there are people who are really reflective and they can really be in tune with who they are. But I'd say most people, including myself, are quite inaccurate. What we think, who we think we are, is often just not that if we just take a closer look. For example, we can actually record many things about who we are, right? If I say like, oh, I'm a person who always makes it on time, and I could do a good job at recording every single appointment, whether or not I made it on time. And maybe the fact is I actually don't make it on time that much. Maybe I only make it on time 60% of the time, right? There's an aspect of we are what our habits are, right? Oh, I'm a healthy person, but hey, today I just ate a sweet pastry stuffed with cheese and a sandwich full of carbs. I craved and ate an ice cream sandwich. All that in one day. Am I healthy? I mean, obviously these words are imperfect measures, imperfect symbols of what we mean by who we are, right? It's so, simple to say, I am this, I am that. It's words are imperfect at doing that. So already we have something that's imperfect. So yeah, I think that one way we can describe who we are is our habits, and we could actually record our habits. Like we could record how much you walk every day. You can have actual data around this to record what your habits are. And are you in line with who you think you are?
That's pretty good methods. Yeah, 就是刚刚他就是也有提到说，因为我问到说，那如果为了要知道我是谁，我从哪里来，是不是就是一个练习丢除自我的过程？他其实也蛮认同的，他就觉得我们平常以为我们的是谁，其实并不一定代表事实上你就是你认定的那个样子。怎么说呢？比如说你长期都觉得我很健康，我就是一个很注意饮食习惯的人，但是你回想一下，今天早上呢，他可能吃了一个冰淇淋三明治，然后又吃了面线，这些东西其实都在他的那个健康饮食习惯里面不应该有的，但是他却做了。所以要做的第一件事情，并不是去忽略你做过的事情，然后一直觉得说自己就是一个很注重饮食健康的人。所以首先要有觉知说，我今天早上的确我有点违反了我的健康饮食规则，我去吃了碳水化合物，然后又吃了这么多糖，那个 ice cream 里面嘛。所以养成一个习惯，去定期的检视自己，然后记录下来。那久而久之，我们就会更贴近我们之前所认定的自己。当我们能够逐渐缩短，我认为的自己跟我实际上的自己的距离，那么我们也会越忠于自己了。到那个时候，其实我们内在是非常有力量的，因为我们知道自己是谁。我们知道我们不是完美的人，我们也是有缺点的人。但一旦体认到 就好了啊，就是一旦承认，其实就放下了。你也知道你是人，然后也有这些渴望，这些你想偷懒，这些你不想吃那么健康食物的时候，那这其实是会让我们内在我们的身心比较处于一个和谐的状态。So I just share that in order to building up the habit to check yourself.That gonna to bring you more clear thoughts about who you are, and the distance between who I think I am and who I really are. The distance is coming shoulder and shoulder.
Right.
That will bring the harmony in yourself.
Right.
Because we're recognized as a human being, we all have flaws, and it's okay to be flawed. How to say it?
Yeah,
flawed?
It's okay to be flawed, and we need to be open and non-judgmental.And accepting of where we are at, and we're all a part in a process, in a journey.
Yeah, so at that time point, we won't feel like we won't have such big conflicts in our mind, or what I should do, what I should not do, because at that time point, we're pretty sure and pretty know who we really are, and it's okay just to accept something that we cannot change.Like if I want to have the sugar like once or 2 times a week, then just okay. Don't be so mean to yourself. Say that how I'm so bad. I didn't follow my diet rules, and that's just totally fine. Just know who you really are. Then that will solve lots of problems that you.Tell yourself what type of story it is.
Yeah, totally. And if you have the reaction of, oh, I'm such a bad person, I can't even follow a diet, that kind of also says something about who you are too, right?
Yeah.
A little bit about self-criticism and judgment. That's also another thing. Yeah, so I think one part is this habits, right? And I think another part is a little bit more towards who we want to be. Like, we all have these values that we have, but to what extent do we really live and embody those values that we say we really care about, right? Like for me, like, oh, I value unconditional love, but I prove every single day that I don't have unconditional love. I mean, it's super hard to do. It's the work of a lifetime, but that's one example.
Now you admit.
Oh, I always admit.
Yeah, so I think it's super important to not only just know who you are and where you are, but also where you really want to lead yourself to, who you're gonna to become. You know, like if we know that's something we don't like, we know some parts that we like, then can you give yourself a more specific and clear picture of you to become the person you really wish to be?
Yeah. You know the word integrity? Integrity. You know, integrity, you could define it in many ways, and that word is used in many contexts. For example, it's used in the engineering of a skyscraper. Does this building have good structural integrity? What that means is that, is it constructed well so that all of the bars of metal are lined up perfectly so that the structure has maximum strength, right? Integrity, when it comes to how we live our lives, means that we are in line. Our values are in line with our thoughts, and our thoughts are in line with our actions. We live in integrity with a full alignment between what we value, what we think, and what we act.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Thanks for your sharing. 所以我们刚刚又在最后提到了说，其实问自己我是谁，我从哪里来，更重要的是你要问自己说我要去哪里，然后我要成为一个什么样的人呢？那像 Brian 刚刚就有提到说，他举一个例子，就是完整，比完美更重要的是完整这个字。完整的意思就是说，你让自己的想法跟行动能够一致性的表达出你这一个人。那么这样子的话，你就不会有那么多内在的冲突， 然后觉得你要符合许多的规范，或者是许多的规定。因为成为一个真正完整的一个状态，比起什么都力求完美，要自然，而且更符合我们自己生而为人的一个发展的方向。Yeah, is there anything you want to add more to this podcast?
Yeah, I think so. I think one important thing that I want to talk about is that mostly we've been talking about who we are in terms of how we think and how we act as we live in this world. But I also think that there's an important part of who we are that's separate from that. And that's a part of the sense of being that comes with something like meditation. When we meditate, and when you show me meditation, I get the sense of I'm not just someone who acts out my values. I'm also just alive. I'm also just a center of consciousness. I'm also a being that wants to have well-being, wants to be nourished, and doesn't want to suffer.
You mean like a super at present state? And just remind me when we watched the movie Soul, like I really enjoy the moments and feel like we're not different from the surroundings.
Yeah, so I think that there is also an underlying definition of who we are that we share with every single human being and every living thing. And it's that we are conscious. We are conscious beings. And just by that, we do have, that is a big part of ourselves. And I do think that relates us, me and you, to each other and to every living thing on this earth. And it relates us in love, right? It relates us in the shared longing for connection and for flourishing, and the shared desire to avoid pain and suffering, to live a good life. And I think that's a beautiful way to recognize who we are, that lets us connect us with everything else outside of us so that we can feel at one with everyone else.
Very, very beautiful. 我们刚刚就是还有提到一点，就是除了我们脑袋中一直不断的认为我认为我是谁，那我认为我周遭人给我的定义我是谁，我从哪里来之外，其实还有另外一个想法我们可以思考，就是当我们经常进入一个冥想的状态，其实我们就只是在那一个临在里面跟周遭万物一起存在。那有时候像他提到我带他一起静心冥想的时候，很多时刻他都可以感受到他是一个意识，那他跟周遭的世界，周遭的意识集体意识共同交织而成，然后只是静静的存在在那一个当下，那一个状态里面。那当你在那一种完全临在的状态中，你会把你自己内在的那一份爱跟周围世界的那一份爱连结起来，然后呢，你们是很想要彼此连结的，很想要建立那一份连结感的。那当你处在这样子非常临在的状态中，其实也是在提醒我们是谁，我们就是要成为那一个合一，我们是不可分割的。你的快乐，我也同样可以感受到你的快乐，你的痛苦，我也同样感受到你的痛苦。当我们知道我们不再分别其他人跟我之间的差异，我们也不会有那么多的可能要做出很多防卫自己、保护自己的行为而伤害别人的心。所以我觉得这个是一个很好的 takeaway。Yeah, thanks for your sharing. I think this is the end of our first episode.
Yay! Hopefully it won't be a last. I had a lot of fun doing this. I'd love to come back.
Yeah.
Will you invite me again?
I'm not sure. Let me see how the audience, their reaction is.
Hey, give me a thumbs up, okay? Thumbs up for me so I can come back.
Yeah, if you like this type of style and talk with Brian, please let me know so that I can invite him in the future more often. 所以呢，非常感谢，今天我们的录音就先到此为止。那其实这是我们第一次做这样子的尝试，不然之前其实都是会邀请讲国语的来宾一起上来。但是这样子，因为平常跟他的对话真的有非常多的想法，我也觉得他的许多观念可以带给我们听众很多的启发，所以希望你们会喜欢。如果你们有任何想法，都可以跟我分享，无论是你们喜欢或者是需要改进的地方，都可以留言让我知道。所有关于联系我的社交资讯，都可以在本集节目中的简介中找到。然后，如果你喜欢我的节目，还有我用心的经营的这一份心意，也欢迎呢在 iTunes Store 上面留下评论，给予5颗星，然后告诉我你正在听哪一集，这对我之后呢，要进行优化有很大的一个帮助。那我们这集就先到这里为止，谢谢大家的聆听，我们下集再会，拜拜，
拜拜。